Richard Nixon flew home from Moscow triumphant after he had signed the first superpower treaty to limit nuclear weapons. He came straight to Congress. It was election year.
Well, of course, it will not be lost on many people in his audience, both in the Capitol and elsewhere tonight, that this is a pretty good way to impress a lot of voters.
The President of the United States.
I suppose this is just about the peak of Richard Nixon's political career at this moment.
The president savored the moment, then, before the hard slog of the campaign, took a brief break.
We had a long, difficult schedule before that. I just returned from the Moscow summit. We'd had long meetings. I wanted everybody to have the weekend off.
While Nixon was away, 5 of his men were arrested in Washington. They were caught red-handed inside Democratic Party headquarters in a building called the Watergate. The same team had already committed a succession of crimes for the White House. The president and his inner circle saw no option but to organize a cover-up.
It was a program or a concern for containment, to keep this problem and this investigation and the story, the publicity on it and all that, limited to the Watergate break-in.
The Watergate break-in had been planned, paid for and executed by Nixon's election campaign committee. But their high command wasn't in Washington on the day of the break-in. They were in California to campaign with one of the key figures in the Republican Party.
Our primary purpose was to ensure that Governor Reagan felt comfortable with the campaign. So we had planned a series of events culminating in a very fancy fundraising dinner at one of the Hollywood stars' homes on a Saturday night.
Back in Washington, the man who had presided over the fiasco at the Watergate had to make a difficult phone call.
And I wanted it to be an absolutely secure conversation. I still had a White House pass. I went over into the White House, and I went into what is known as the Situation Room. There was a KYX scrambler phone over there, and it would be available. Well, of course, there's no scrambler phone in the hotel where I'm told Mr. Magruder is. So I called Magruder, and I said, look, I need to speak to you securely. There is a missile base, a guided missile base, run by the Air Force, just in such and such a place. Go down there and hit Magruder. Why do I have to go to a missile base? Why do I have to talk to this company? You know? And I said, look, I need to speak to you securely.
All I thought was there's Liddy playing his, little spy games again.
Magruder used the most secure line available, the hotel payphone. Liddy told him that 4 of the men arrested, the same Cuban Americans they'd used before, couldn't be connected to Nixon. But the 5th man could. He was James McCord, who worked full-time for the president's campaign. Now Magruder had a difficult message for his superiors.
He said, we got a slight PR problem. And I said, well, if it's a PR problem, that's your bailiwick. He said, this is a PR problem that requires a lawyer.
Their top lawyer was Nixon's ex-Attorney General, now campaign chairman John Mitchell. He had approved Liddy's costly plans, but had left the day-to-day operations to Magruder.
Mitchell asked Magruder point blank, how much money did you give Liddy? And Magruder replied, $80,000. Mitchell said, he was aghast. He said, $80,000? And before he finished the sentence, Magruder said, but you Oh, you authorized $200,000. Mitchell's reply was yes, but the campaign hasn't started yet.
And that I will well and faithfully discharge.
And that I will well and faithfully discharge
the duties
Their
of the
thoughts
office.
turned to Richard Kleindienst, Mitchell's successor as Attorney General. He had the power to order McCord's release from jail, but to get him to do it would be an obstruction of justice.
You know, at some point, somebody, I don't know if Mitchell said this, I don't know if Marty Ender said it. Hell, I may have said it. Let's call Kleindienst and find out what's going on.
But the Attorney General wasn't at home. Their next call, as this phone bill from Mitchell's suite shows, went to Gordon Liddy's number at Nixon campaign headquarters.
John Mitchell wanted me to get a hold of Richard Kleindienst, who was then the Attorney General of the United States, and to say that he, John Mitchell, wanted Richard Kleindienst to get McCord out of jail because McCord was the security chief of the Committee to Re-elect the President. Direct connection.
Liddy tracked down Kleindienst at Burning Tree, an exclusive golf club outside Washington. They met in the locker room.
Whereupon I said, okay, I don't know whether you've heard about the break-in and thing. And I said, I have to tell you, that was our operation, my operation. I was responsible. He said, oh, God, you know. I said, yep, I made the mistake.
He said, General, he said, John Mitchell told me to tell you to get these people out of jail right now, and I mean right now. And I said, what in the hell do you think you're talking about, Gordon?
You know, Kleindienst was just apoplectic.
I'm not going to do what you said, and if you say anything like that to me again, I'm going to put you in jail.
And I said, yes. I said, I understand. I said, you know, God knows what would happen to you if you do a thing like that. He said, fuck what happens to me. What happens to the President of the United States I do a stupid thing like that?
The newly sworn-in Attorney General ordered that Watergate should proceed like any other case. Yet he sat on the information that could have cracked it wide open on its very first day. Kleindienst didn't tell the Watergate prosecutors about Gordon Liddy's confession, nor about John Mitchell's criminal request to spring McCord. The chief law enforcement officer of the United States was turning a blind eye to the cover-up. That same morning, FBI agents, his department, were struggling to make sense of the unusual haul seized from the Watergate burglars.
When we went into the property room, spread out on the table were electronic devices, walkie-talkies, cameras, a huge amount of film, and a gym bag. Curious that I was, I opened the gym bag and saw more film, and then there was some tissue paper. And I reached in to pull the tissue paper, and out fell a little black device with a couple of wires on it.
This device was one of several electronic bugs the burglars had brought in to Democratic headquarters. The men were also caught with keys to their rooms in the Watergate Hotel. In one of them, Bernard Barker's, the FBI stumbled across an innocuous-looking clue.
One of the agents, while assisting the police, was going through the dresser drawer, and being as thorough as he was, just flipping through there, the paper goes up, and there's this envelope.
I had given a letter of mine to Bernie Barker to mail. Asked him to, when he left the hotel room where Liddy and I were, heading out for the elevators, I had asked him to take this letter and drop it in the mail chute.
Howard Hunt's carelessness cost far more than the $6.36 he owed his country club. The FBI ran his name through their files and found that he was a long-time CIA officer whom they had vetted for White House employment a year earlier. A few phone calls confirmed that he was indeed on the White House staff. For Nixon's men, keeping Watergate away from the president was going to be a nightmare.